Okay, so this is Earthship interview take one. It'd only be one take. So I've got to make sure I'm in here tight. And so I'm sitting here with Sharon. No, that's not the right way to say it.
You want me to start now?
Yep.
So welcome, dude. It's very nice for you to take the time to have this interview with me. From my understanding, I believe you have quite a fan base already established with your Earthship build.
A few punters, yeah.
A few punters? Excellent. So your website is up and running and has been for some time, and I believe you've got about 5,000 followers, is that right?
Yeah, around about that, yeah.
Excellent. That's amazing. So it's obviously something that the world is ready for and interested and engaged in understanding what this whole Earthship build is all about. So my question to you is, can you tell me what is the Earthship build status at this very moment?
Yeah, well, there's been a bit of a hiatus. I've had some personal stuff to work out with my parents and whatnot. But so currently we've got, as you can see, the tyres are all in place and they've been rendered on the inside and out. And we're just preparing for the dome roof. So part of that means getting the steel and cage wire structure done, and then before we put in the cement pour, so it'll be a cement dome as such.
Wow. So how does that work? I'm kind of trying to understand the problematic side of that. A dome made out of concrete, wouldn't that be too heavy for the roofing? Wouldn't that present you some problems in the weight issue, like the dome crashing in on itself?
Well, what you do, as Mike Reynolds shows in the video, is put in things like t-shirts and old Italian strip and cut them up into strips, dip them into a concrete slurry, and then lie it across the cage wire thing as an initial base to give the strength, and then pour the concrete over that.
Right, okay, so that will give you a much more,
Yeah.
And I assume this concrete is not as heavy as the rendering that you've used on the outside. It must be a lower grade concrete,
Well, it's just
lightweight concrete.
Yeah, the t-shirt material will hold the concrete in place, and
Right.
It won't fall through. There'll be some spillage into the floor a little bit, but most of it will be retained on the wire and the steel, and it creates its strength from that.
Right, that's interesting. Okay, so obviously there's a cost factor involved in building one of these Earthship, and you do mention a lot about cost in your answer. I presume you think that homeowners of tomorrow will be under a load of financial stress and therefore have no option but to consider dwelling like this. What's your take on that, dude?
Well, I mean, I do. I suppose you could call me a futurist of sorts, and the way I do a lot of research like everyone else out there my age, and we've got a lot of opinions, but in my humble opinion, I think things could potentially get a lot worse for us in terms of financial, climate, pollute, all that sort of things. You're looking at something like Greece, for example. So we're talking about debt, we're talking about default, we're talking about collapse, we're talking about contagion, like it could spread to other countries. We could be in for like a huge financial collapse, and what would be the ramification of that? I'd study things like Argentina from 15 years ago, what happened to that country when they went through a collapse of sort. And forget about governments and corporations looking after the people. The people have to actually look after themselves. And I suppose that's my thrust, is that, forget about welfare checks. It's going to be, the people have to come up with the ingenuity themselves. And my thrust, I suppose, is simplicity. So, and just looking after the basics, of which shelter is part of it. Water, food, just utilities. I mean, forget about, in that Argentina situation I talked about, there was no concept of any of those things, and so it was kind of a homegrown product. But I don't know what will happen with Greece, but it'll be interesting to see, if the creditors just had enough, because, they talk about kicking the can down the road, but the way I think of it is more like kicking a piece of fruit. After a while, there's no more fruit to actually kick.
There's just the pip left.
That's right. You're going to have to, all your chickens are going to come home to roost, as they say. But in a way though, I'm bring it on, I say, because the sooner we can get through this period of turmoil, as I call it, I think we can see what's on the other side and what that looks like. And I'm sure is part of it's going to be ugly, but at the same time, I think there's incredible hope for other stuff to be going on, because there's a lot of doubt and fear and anxiety, all that sort of stuff, and nothing good can come of that when people are in that mental state.
So my question to you, dude, is yes, the instability of what's happening in Greece, does have a worldwide effect, because it could be like a domino effect, that it then, translates throughout the whole of society worldwide,
Yeah.
However, people currently have their houses and dwellings that they live in and their mortgage and everything like that. So we would have to change the whole landscape of our current living accommodation style. So does that mean all the houses that are in society and in suburbs now, would they be demolished and replaced by this Earthship? Is that how far forward you're projecting the world?
Not exactly.
No.
I just think not everyone's going to have the opportunity to invest in like a house like this, for example. Not everyone's got $500,000 or $600,000 lying around. That not everyone's going to even afford the mortgage repayments. So what will happen is that, but people still want to live. People still want their own independence. People still want to, and even the rental markets. I'm thinking if there is a collapse, all that stuff can only go one way, and that's up. The cost of petrol, that'll drive everything up.
So our society as a whole, I know that, Europe, most people in Europe don't own their own home. They have to rent.
Yeah.
So if we talk specifically about Australia, currently, with the way society is, there's a lot of single income homes out there due to the collapse of the marriage institution. So there's a lot of single mothers out there raising children on their own and can't get back into their own home. So they are renting. So, go forward 10, 20 years, the rental is just going to get unachievable for somebody to be able to afford because the cost of living and the wages aren't increasing fast enough with the cost of living. So hence people will need land to put a dwelling on. How do you see that happening?
Well, I think that's what I'm saying. They might not have $500,000 for a house in Coorparoo and in Brisbane, but they might have 50,000, say, to go out in the country somewhere where there is a bit of rainfall, where maybe there's some land to actually grow some fruit and vegetables, where they can literally get off the grid, which is part of what the solution is all about. So
you're talking about self-sustaining rural communities, basically. Yeah. So we're kind of going back to, a hippie commune kind of scenario.
Yeah.
A bit of the love and peace. We're all, in a community. We have our own dwelling that we can survive, provide our own food. But we're kind of stepping out of the norm of what society dictates as, the normal path through life of owning your own home and paying your mortgage off over X amount of years.
Oh, and there's a practical side to it as well. It's all hippie trippy stuff is all well and good, but there's also a practical element. Nobody wants to be working big hours to get, and what income they do have, all taken by the paying the rent or paying utilities, paying all the stuff, which we've been conditioned to believe is what you do. And no wonder people feel like they're a piece of elastic band being pulled apart, because there's the costs of everything can only go one way in my in this financial collapse scenario.
Yeah, well, we're in the year 2015, and I would prudently say that the average person, let's talk about Brisbane, where we live currently, the average person is living week to week. You know, they don't have a lot of extra money left over once they've paid, you know, their for their accommodation, their food, their clothing, their insurances, all of the expenses, you know, bills that, you know, an average household has on a weekly basis. There's not a lot left over, so people aren't able to sell. And, you know, through the breakup of marriages, you know, and you know, a lot of people end up having to rent for the rest of their life, you know, and you know, they're at the dictates of their landlord. You know, they can't have their own, you know, we're brought up and raised here in Brisbane to want security for our family and have our own home and everything like that. But unfortunately, the reality of the way society's going, that isn't, you know, necessarily the option that we can look at for our future, is it? So I assume, you know, this Earthship concept that you've got going is a viable and acceptable alternative.
Exactly right. Alternative is probably the key word there, because at the end of the day, it's more about people just coming in to see that, you know, what can be achieved. And I mean, this is not a perfect structure by any means, but it is functional and it does work. And it's the simplicity of the build which should give potential builders some hope that they can achieve it. And I mean, everyone knows a place where they can get old tyres. Everyone knows everyone can collect aluminium cans. So a lot of the building products, you don't have to spend a lot of money, you know, to get, you know, some of these things going. And also there's the added concepts of things like thermal mass. We haven't even talked about climate yet, but I mean, it's projected that Brisbane's going to have, you know, 3 times as many days over 35 degrees centigrade, you know, in the next 10 years. So you're going to have a lot of hot days. And, you know, the traditional ways of keeping cool, like the pools, swimming pools and the air conditioning, they're not going to be an option, because, you know, the cost to run those utilities, you know, the dollars aren't even going to be there. So what I'm saying is, let's use the natural temperature of the earth. So, yeah, you're actually supposed to build these things actually into the earth and use that. Yeah, you're using the tyres as thermal mass, one layer, but then you're creating a berm up against the side of it, and you actually, so the idea would be to be 5 degrees cooler inside this thing during the heat of the Queensland day. That's the theory.
So
Kids.
as a structure, obviously this is a small sample. You can build them on a much larger scale. That
Absolutely.
You can have bedrooms and other rooms, a dining room, etc. So I guess, how do you see, you know, because we are trapped in a world of materialism where people do want the beautiful home, you know, that's rendered and has the pool. You know, do you think that mentally and emotionally that young people coming through society can do that mental shift of, you know, living in a dwelling similar to this?
Yeah, well, when I saw the lecture with Mr. Mike Reynolds a few years back, he talked about necessity being the mother of invention. So they won't actually be given a choice. So it's just going to be the reality of the situation.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, things can change real fast on when we're talking about global financial systems now. We saw what happened in 2008. What could potentially happen again? It's just, in my humble opinion, it could be way more catastrophic when we have to face the fact of this debt. And it's the debt that's the problem.
Well, people won't have any other option up their sleeve, will they, really? Or otherwise they'll be facing homelessness, you know, because they can't afford the rents, they can't afford a mortgage, they can't afford, you know, to keep up with the living costs. So, and I think, you know, it's a very valid point. You know, all eyes are on Greece at the moment, because that's the first time in history that a country has defaulted and is totally broke, you know. So the slide-on effect of that worldwide, you know, it's going to be very interesting to see, you know, what effect that has on a global basis on a monetary, you know, for the monetary.
A lot of countries, a lot of states, including Queensland, have huge amount of debt.
Yes.
And just facing that fact, and how to not everyone's going to have the option of liquidating their debt either.
And I find it really interesting as well, dude, that a lot of the young children coming up through our education system, there's very wide sort of accountability about the fact that a lot of these children will have 5 to 10 jobs throughout their career, compared to us in our 50s. We didn't, a lot of people have worked through having 2 or 3 jobs maybe. I think that predictor is very low. I think they'll have a lot more jobs, but we're going to face the issue of having an overburdened tax welfare system for the number of baby boomers coming into their retirement and having to fund those, and we're not going to have as many people in the workforce to do the work and produce the money to supply and demand and sustain the
monetary outgoings.
So well, from what I know about you, dude, you seem to put a whole lot of focus on a person's well-being. So I'm thinking in that way, you see Earthships, how are they related to this? You free yourself from being a slave to a mortgage, utilities and insurance, and then you can concentrate on yourself?
Well, that's right. I mean, you mentioned the 60s before, and our generation, so we had the luxury of, we're not being cruisy, but we're able to go through a life and raise a family, but get a mortgage and have some time, to listen to the Beatles records as I did, and get some time and space to start what I call concentrating on the self, meaning ask the bigger questions.